there are 600 million of these farms around the world and over 2.5 billion people engaged in those farming activities. And they are at the forefront of where we want to be protecting soil, protecting vegetation, and basically they're caretakers for a lot of the earth and a lot of the areas on the earth that are most critical and imperiled right now. And so engaging with them and providing them with earned income over time is something that we're focused on, and bringing those in the form of carbon credits and other types of climate related measurements to market right now. Those are the markets that are the most active. We're able to help increase their household income, as well as work with them on a pathway towards being able to secure more carbon in the soil, which is one of the biggest things that they can be doing.
Welcome back to the Clean Techies podcast, where we interview the top client founders and VCs to get their best advice for you. In this episode, I chat with Josh Knauer, CEO of ReSeed, bringing carbon credits directly from farmers to the market. They focus on the oldest form of carbon capture, vegetation. They support farmers in taking their protective and restorative farming practices, validating them, and then creating mechanisms to be able to sell those credits to interested parties. We talked about his strategy to differentiate these credits compared to the rest of the market, what worked for them, how he's building an entire protocol around these methods, what he's learned from engaging with smallholder farms, why ag may have the best solution to nature-based carbon credits, and more. As always, thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the episode. All right, Josh, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for asking.
I appreciate that. I'm super excited for this episode. We actually had a bit of technical difficulties before this ahead of time, so I think we got out a lot of the misfortune, and I think we're gonna have a fantastic episode. So I really appreciate you calling in. I understand you're traveling right now, so this is you especially made time for this. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I just came from Alaska, where I've been for the past week in Sitka, Alaska, working with the Sitka tribe, and I'm now in Seattle, and will be on the road now for the next quite a while, actually.
Oh
So
wow! And
it's a
it's
fun
all
time.
related to ReSeed?
All related to my work with ReSeed. I also a little bit of I do a bunch of nature photography work as well, and so uh, for up in Sitka, Alaska, I was doing a mix of reseed work and some nature photography.
Wow! I'm sure they both go hand in hand sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of, when you're passionate about your work, and, you feel invigorated and energized by it, and the people that you're around, it really helps with the creative process as well. So
Yeah.
they definitely go hand in hand.
Yeah, and we're gonna get to this, but the audience, for those who doesn't know, we're about to get into what ReSeed actually is, but I think everyone will see why they go so well in hand. So I've kind of hinted at it already, but please tell the audience, what is ReSeed and what do you do?
Cool. Well, ReSeed is a company that I helped co-found with my two other co-founders, Vasco and Zach. And we are a company that works to increase access to ecosystem services markets for small farmers around the world. And by ecosystem services markets, what we mean is helping farmers receive the value, economic value, for the types of services that they provide to us beyond just providing us with food and other products that we need. And so they have been traditionally excluded from these markets up until this point. And we're one of the first companies to figure out a way to partner with and work alongside farmers to help them uh, harvest this new crop that they can bring to market and be paid for, which is data. The services that they're providing, such as carbon sequestration or soil protection or biodiversity protection, and as well as tracking the socioeconomic benefits of those activities on their land. Because when you're talking about small farmers around the world, you're almost always talking about some of the poorest, most disenfranchised communities around, that live at or below the poverty level in the countries in which they live. And these family farmers, or smallholder farmers, you'll hear me say those terms interchangeably. There are 600 million of these farms around the world, and over 2.5 billion people engaged in those farming activities. And they are at the forefront of where we want to be protecting soil, protecting vegetation, and basically they're caretakers for a lot of the earth and a lot of the areas on the earth that are most critical and imperiled right now. And so engaging with them and providing them with earned income over time is something that we're focused on, and bringing those in the form of carbon credits and other types of climate related measurements to market right now. Those are the markets that are the most active. We're able to help increase their household income, as well as work with them on a pathway towards being able to secure more carbon in the soil, which is one of the biggest things that they can be doing.
Yeah, and I think you pointed it out really quickly, but it's really interesting to see the impact of climate across the globe. And we might be based in the US, and I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs, and on this podcast, but just honestly, frankly, due to the IRA and incentives, where a lot of climate entrepreneurs come from. But when you look at a map, and a very colorful, well illustrated map of where climate impact is actually felt, you'll notice that it is actually in places like sub-Saharan Africa, emerging markets, and other places like that, where you see the majority of impacts from climate. And so there's that need for adaptation. And I think you do some really
Absolutely.
exciting work on that front. So I'm excited to talk about that. But I'd love to set the scene. If I'm a farmer, the audience knows, for me, for example, I'll use this example. I lived in Kenya for a little bit and did some work. It's come up on a number of episodes. And so if I'm a farmer in sub-Saharan Africa, let's say, and Nigeria is where you have a partnership, how do I essentially go from what I'm doing day to day and end up on ReSeed's platform and with credits that people can buy?
Yep. So ReSeed, it's really important, I think, to start off with the first thing that you mentioned, which is that we are, so I'm based here in the United States. My other business partners are in Mexico and Brazil. But we don't ever show up to a farmer's front door and knock on their door and try to recruit farmers directly. We always work through local NGOs or tribes or tribal organizations or cooperatives. And the idea is that these are organizations that already have trusted relationships with farmers on the ground. And so if you are a farmer, you would find out about ReSeed through your local, the NGO that you already have a partnership with on the ground in sub-Saharan Africa, for example. In Nigeria, that is an organization called CREAC, and they are on a regular basis the ones providing technical support to farmers and ag tech support and all different types of interactions that they have with these farmers on a regular basis. Farmers learn about a new program, usually through a community meeting that takes place, where they have the ability to earn extra income. Basically, what they're asked to do is, and I'm skipping over a whole bunch of steps, of course, but they're asked to fill out some forms on an app, and do that on every 6 months or so. And so what those farmers do is they sign up, they understand the process that they're going through, what it is that we're looking for, and we're just asking them to document the vegetation and soil practices on their land. And sometimes, if we need it, the boundaries of the land that they're in charge of farming. And so that initial work and interaction from the farmer is really the most amount of work that they need to do for us. Usually in a year, maybe 3 to 6 hours of time. They're literally walking their land and pressing a button every time they're at a new different type of vegetation, or if they have taken this field or this forest and done some specific soil application to it, they let us know about that as well. And after that process, they also answer a bunch of socioeconomic questions that are related to the social impact measurement work that we do, which on our website, you can see it well documented. It's called the Farmer Stability Index. It's built on an IPCC methodology for figuring out the vulnerability of farmers on their land. And we have adapted that for the purposes of ecosystem services and tying everything together into one comprehensive set of measurements. And we are able to determine the vulnerability of those farmers. So when they are at a high degree of vulnerability, that makes them eligible for us to be able to start issuing conservation or protection credits for their land. And those credits happen after we've monitored the stability of their land using satellite imagery, and all that data that they're entering in goes up in. They own their own data, just to be clear. It goes up into our cloud-based system. We have a partnership with Google and several others that allow us to aggregate that data together and then cross-reference it through a whole bunch of algorithms, and there's a bunch of AI, machine learning type stuff involved, that allow us basically then to monitor that land, and is the vegetation stable? Are they cutting down trees? Is there disturbances to soil that are happening? And assuming no, then start measuring all the different sort of positive properties of water in the soil, and carbon specifically is one of the big areas of measurement that we get to. But basically that process from the day the farmer signs up to when a first credit can start being issued can be as short as 6 months. It can be as long as 12 months. And basically that just depends on a whole bunch of different factors. But we are then in an ongoing relationship with that farmer for 5 years. We are their business partner. That's the way we look at it. When we are able to sell the credits that we are generating with them from their land, then those farmers immediately get paid, and are paid equitably. Like literally, they get 50% of the gross sale of that carbon credit, for example, or other type of data asset that's being sold. And so those farmers are able to see within a growing season, which is the idea, the income start to increase. And depending on where they are in the world and the density of pre-existing carbon storage that's being protected or conserved in the ground, and in the vegetation, that can be a significant amount of money for them. In some areas in Brazil that we're working right now, we're seeing a doubling of household income as we sell those credits, so on an annual basis. So this is a significant new form of income. Programs that exist for farmers where they can have earned income. So it's not just a grant that they might get once or an aid package or something like that, but this is ongoing revenue that they can then plan in, just like they plan their harvest revenue. And that revenue is crucial to stabilizing farmers on their land so they can actually stay in place, maintain the biodiversity that they currently have, and make choices on their own to then decide whether they want to continue in that process and actually change some farming practices, or rather than changing farming practices, in most cases what it is build in enhancements they want to do into their property, either through agroforestry or through soil amendment or work practices that farming practices they might do that are regenerative, that actually cause more carbon to become present in the soil, to be sequestered from the atmosphere. And that creates the second type of credit that we can issue, which is a removal credit. And the goal of getting farmers on that pathway towards removals is definitely the overarching goal. But the first thing you have to do, and this is something that most pre-existing programs never really got, is you have to figure out how to stabilize the farmers on their land before you can actually ask them to start changing their farming practices. And this methodology that we've come up with and a protocol that we've now published and it's on its way to becoming an internationally recognized standard, is something that we believe is the best possible path forward to engage these hundreds of millions of farms in the world in this climate fight in a way that's substantive and fair.
We are excited to announce that we have launched a Patreon. You can find this newly linked in our Substack and audio platform descriptions. We are both really just so grateful for each and every one of you, and wanted to create a way to interact with you and for you to support us on our journey as we continue and try to talk to the best people doing amazing things in climate tech. We do all of this on the time we can muster outside of our day jobs, so any support means the world. Now, gushing over, back to the show.
And so there's clearly a lot going on. And so you started talking about the dynamics that you have to engage with when it comes to recruiting farmers and getting them to actually use and notice the technology in the first place. That's obviously, we talked about this beforehand, and we'll definitely get into it. It's a very complicated dynamic that doesn't really align with some of the ways we've been thinking about customer acquisition in the West, for example. But then you talk about the changed behavior and what's required for that. Then how do you monitor that relationship and the data change, and how do you really engage in a way that's meaningful not only for the farmers but also for the people that are interested in supporting and buying these credits. And then finally, the relationship with them and how you help sell those different types of credits and
Yep.
opportunities to other people, and then of course
Yep.
growing that in the different ways that you said. So a lot of really, really interesting things there. You, I want to take a second to walk back and highlight the fact that you are an expert in carbon markets, and I think it's super, super exciting to see the multifaceted mindset. The reason I say that is because carbon markets are so complex, and I think it's very valid for people to have gotten into carbon markets when they did a little while ago, right? I feel like that was one of the
Hmm.
earliest technologies to get in, but you ended up having a lot of founders who got in without understanding the full mechanics and the domain expertise needed to really make a difference within it. And you clearly have that. So I want to talk starting there.
Sure.
Can you walk us through how you navigate and what you've learned the carbon credit marketplace space?
Well, so I think, you know, carbon credit markets are, there's very much more than one, to be clear. There's, hundreds of different avenues for how a carbon credit can be sold on the market, how it can be created as well. There are carbon credits that are created through mechanical processes like direct air capture. There are carbon credits that are generated from the use of renewable energy, sort of replacing fossil fuel-based energy consumption, getting a credit for that. We operate specifically in an area, in a domain where in the nature-based carbon credit world, and we operate in sort of two different areas of it, I guess. One would be trying to stabilize and conserve, protect existing carbon stock, and make sure that it doesn't become, that we avoid future emissions happening as a result. For example, on the farms that we work in, the vulnerability levels that they're at, that is where 80% of deforestation is taking place on the planet today, right? So if you want to stop deforestation, the way to do it is to engage with people. And this is a different philosophy, I think, that we've come to. Most of the forest-based carbon initiatives that have happened prior to this point in time have been really focused on protecting deep, sort of old growth or untouched forest, and how to make sure it doesn't ever, you prevent it from being logged in the future. That's led to a bunch of problems in the carbon markets, and was it ever really under threat or not, or whatever. What we realized is that if you want to achieve conservation goals, you have to go to the areas around those untouched forests, right? So maybe not right in the middle of the Amazon, where, only indigenous people are living, and there's really no, there's always a threat of deforestation that could take place. But instead of drawing a line around and basically creating like a national park like thing and saying nobody can do anything in this area, what we do is we look at the buffer areas around it. And so look where people and nature actually meet. And we've designed a system based on years of decades of experience, both in the carbon markets, but also Vasco van Roosmalen, my business partner, has been decades working with communities on self-determination and mapping out of their territories, and all kinds of really cool efforts, right, that have sort of come, that have been all brought together into what we're doing. Right. And the idea, once again, is to engage effectively using markets, using economic systems,
Right.
To incentivize the type of behavior that we want to see. And it's not just incentivized in some sort of patronizing coming in from the outside. It's working side by side with those farmers to achieve the goals that they want to achieve, which is, continue passing on their land to the future generations. Right. And most of our farmers, I think, on average in Brazil right now, have been they've been on working their land for over 300 years, mm-hmm. right? And so these are cycles you want to continue, and what you want to disrupt is the pressure from extreme poverty that smallholder farmers, family farmers around the world have been sort of put into, right. And find ways to disrupt that in a very positive way. And so that is where the engagement side comes in, of thinking about farmers as our partners in this and not the enemy. a lot of people in the carbon world talk about farming. 20% of the world's emissions comes from farming. Fossil fuels being burned on farms and, destruction of habitat and all kinds of other stuff. That's the negative side, sort of that we can address with the same exact tactics, right?
Right.
Smallholder farmers want, they naturally have more biodiversity on their land than industrial agriculture does. They naturally don't really like using pesticides if they can avoid it, or fossil fuel based fertilizers because of all the problems that they bring and the cost. And so rewarding farmers for the practices they've been using for dozens of generations that enhance the soil, that enhance the quality of what is grown, we see amazing results when you are able to financially reward that. So we designed everything that we're doing, both economically and from using science and the best of the methodologies that exist out in the carbon world for measuring carbon, and we've brought it all together and then added on to that the added socioeconomic impacts and tracking that over time and telling those stories of those farmers to customers, so that customers can see that these are super high quality carbon credits, for example,
Right.
and that they are real. And because we are digitally, and I'm just sort of like casually saying this, but it's actually a big deal, we're one of the first carbon projects in the world to digitally track all of the data used in our entire methodology from start to finish, such that it can be digitally, you can audit the data. So our customers have the ability to go in and audit the data itself, so they can trust in what the data is, the fact that it's real. Our farmers can trust in the fact that they own their data until it's sold. And our ongoing monitoring and verification work that we do is some of the most advanced, lowest cost and advanced MRV, which is the term for it, technology that exists today in the market. And so we're really excited about this innovation that we've been able to bring forward and what it means for the ability to now scale this work to millions of farmers globally and gigatons of carbon that can be tracked, both in terms of storage and then hopefully in terms of future removals.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot to unpack there. So within the overall carbon credit space, you sit at the nature-based side. One of the main advantages that you talked about is your ability to stabilize, conserve, and protect the actual developments that are going on that are leading to this, which is, from what I'm understanding from your perspective, of a neglected practice. And in order to that, you've engaged with people to get them to be able to actually do that, whereas maybe it wasn't happening before. So I want to dig into that a little bit. What does engaging with people on the ground actually mean? Maybe just give us an example. It doesn't have to be the full big picture, but what was the key difference in that practice?
Yeah, so the idea, once again, is approaching farmers as partners, not as a commodity. There's a lot of companies that want to sell things to farmers and are very excited to get in and sell things to this untapped market of the most impoverished, poor smallholder farmers in the world. And we come at it just from a different perspective, which is understanding, walking a mile, if you will, in their shoes, really thinking through, okay, if I was a farmer, how would I want, what would be appealing to me, and actually working with communities of farmers and gaining feedback. We have a global council that we've started building now that's all around our protocol and the design of our protocols of how data gets collected and what are the relationships and the rules basically associated with every step, the governance, if you will, of this step every way. And we have farmers participating in that and farmer organizations participating in that and cooperatives and many other industry experts. So the idea is literally building seats at the table for designing the protocol itself and the implementation of it and the governance of it. And then on the ground with farmers, presenting them with a model, a business model that makes sense. It just, you're literally harvesting a new type of crop. Instead of extracting it from your land and sending it off to another market somewhere, the data is the only thing that leaves, but the impacts of that you're measuring are staying behind, which is exactly what you want. And so carbon stays in the ground, soil becomes healthier. We document farming practices like shade grown for cacao
Right.
and coffee, for example, and things like that. And we're able to document the increases in revenue and income that happen as a result of the types of practices that these farmers are able to do, so that eventually, and this is aspirational, but
Right.
we're building, a database of practices that are hyper local. That is, all of this is sourced from individual points of data collected on individual farms, and building up from there a lattice work of practices and impacts and benefits and what happens, so that in the future, we're going to be able to go into new areas of working with new farmers and bring and spread that sort of the wisdom and the knowledge of traditional farming practices and regenerative farming practices into those areas, and know ahead of time and be able to predict, if you do these three things, this is what you
Mm-hmm.
might be able to see happen. And so this is the type of thing that, once again, farmers very rarely have access when they're asked to give up data. Very rarely are they ever given access to the results of it. And so that's a big piece of what we do as well. Our farmers all get access through our partnerships on the ground. So they know what to do with it and how to use it, but they get access to incredibly high resolution monitoring data that we're doing, looking at, this area of this field in which you are farming has the highest potential to add more carbon. And you might want to focus your, limited dollars that you have, focus them on this area. And so highly targeted practices as well, and feedback and access to data, as well as the revenue, are all things that farmers get out of as a result of using this. And communities start, from working in local farming communities, that
Mm-hmm.
when
Yep.
something interesting happens, it 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 bubbles out, right? And others want to know about it and want to get involved. And that's part of the dynamic that's why we have built our model so it can scale. We never really try to avoid just working with one single farmer or just a handful of farmers in a specific community. You want to onboard the entire community when they're ready.
Right.
And be prepared for that. And so these are all factors, and I realize I just went through a broad range of things, but these are all factors that we have to consider. This is far from a fast build up your business model, get your slides right, and make sure you do the right
Yeah.
presentation in front of the farmers, or some group of them, and then bail. This is about ongoing deep relationship, which is the fundamental. When everybody asks us what is our biggest differentiator between what we're doing and everybody else, is we are building deep relationships and ties in the communities in which we're working. And that is the only way to build a financial model, as
Mm-hmm.
well as a results-oriented model for the types of outcomes that we're trying to achieve. That doesn't happen unless you have those deep relationships on the ground. And so fundamentally, all the technology we have, all the platforms, all the ways, really cool things. We can see individual trees falling down and do, we have a new product that we have that is allows it's called EUDR, so it's the EU's deforestation regulation compliant data. And it's a deforestation rule, basically, that the EU just passed, that says that any consumer products coming in, you have to be able to show that they were sourced from land where deforestation has not occurred in the past, I think it's back to 2021. And so we have that data automatically, and we monitor for it on a literally sometimes daily basis going forward. So we have all this very high resolution, from the ground, farmer sourced and satellite sourced, sort of this mix of the two, human and AI coming together for this amazing technology stack that we have. But the fact of the matter is that none of that ever will work if you don't have the relationships on the ground. And quite frankly, I think a lot of others seem to have missed that component. They think, oh, let's just try to eliminate people out of the equation, because people mean error. And we're just going to use AI to figure everything out, and satellites to figure everything out, and never have to even. I've sat through presentations where people are like, yeah, we don't even need to show up, right? We can
Yeah.
just, and that is just the opposite of what you want to do.
Yeah.
If you're trying to affect real change.
Hey guys, we need your help with something. In order to better understand what you like most about the show, what you dislike, and how we can help you, please take 7 minutes to fill out our listener survey if you haven't already. It only takes about 7 minutes, but it will drastically improve our ability to give you the best content that you're looking for. Thanks for your help. Now back to the show.
And so I think to the actual way that you build the consensus there is the perspective that you would have that other people might not have, especially, is the way you built global consensus around the protocol, engaged people on that. One thing you mentioned in this process was also focusing on a business model that actually makes sense for the farmers.
Yes.
So I want to go into that because I think that is something that there's really tangible differences that are, some things take a lot of time to explain, but honestly, some
Yep.
things don't. I think this is one of the things that really doesn't. So the business model that really works, to give some context, in my experience, you definitely see the natural tendency for people in Western philosophy and potentially better resourced ecosystems to assume that you'll be able to generate revenue off the bat and make revenue from your customers and treating your users as your customers in that regard. But places like emerging markets, and especially with smallholder farmers, I think that's like the real small bucket that we're talking about. The statistic is that there's on average 2 hectares of land. For anyone who doesn't know how much land is, that's not a lot of land. That's like really nothing. So these subsistence farmers, who are basically not even making enough for them to live off of, aren't going to have the resources to pay you for an app. So that's the background to the dynamic. But what are you seeing on the ground?
Oh yeah. So once again, this idea, it's a philosophical shift that needs to happen in conservation. It needs to happen in climate action. It needs to happen, quite frankly, in economic development circles as well, which is the people in communities that live on the ground, that are there in the areas that you want to affect some form of change or support the continuation, actually, of to avoid future change, right, and disruption. If you partner with people, it's so obvious when you say it, right? It just sounds so obvious. When you partner with people, as opposed to looking at them as the product, and as opposed to looking at them as the customer, and then also trying to have other customers, buying those credits and making money at that end, and having everybody, you want to, normal MBA foolery is you want to be the market maker in the middle, and everybody pays you to do everything, which, I mean, great if you can have it, but it doesn't work. It doesn't sustain in this type of world. So seeing our farmers as the business partners that generate with us the raw material that we are actually bringing to market is, we think, the most healthy way to look at it. And lo and behold, that's what farmers do on a regular basis. If you grow mangoes and you send mangoes off to the market, you're paid for your mangoes, right? And when you deliver that product successfully to market and somebody buys it, and that's the right way to be approaching, and that's the way the farmer thinks, right? They plant something at the beginning of a season. I'm totally overgeneralizing, of course, but you plant something at the beginning of a season. At the end of the season, it grows. You sell it. When your income's coming in. You might have some tough months in the middle, where you have to work everything and make sure that product is healthy and getting to market. And basically, we've just built in this model so that it mimics that exactly. And so, farmers have goals, of maintaining the current carbon stock that they have and not disrupting it by, through deforestation or burning or any number of other things they might do. And their job is to keep doing what they're doing. And if they want to get to the next level of removals of carbon, it turns out all that's involved in removing more carbon from the atmosphere. This is where I laugh at all of the mechanical systems and all of the backbending ways that people are trying to avoid using nature to help solve this problem. Photosynthesis is the greatest technology on the planet, right? It's existed forever, and before humans were humans, for sure. And so all we need to do is to foster more photosynthesis in order for carbon to be sucked down and clean oxygen to be released, right? That is a very good ecosystem service. And so by focusing on regenerative and traditional farming practices and expanding the health of their soil, you're literally just increasing the ability of that soil and the vegetation that lives on it to suck in more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and photosynthesis to take place. And if you can do that and ensure that there's an ongoing protection of that credit, of that carbon going forward, you have the perfect mechanism for meeting the needs of the global climate objectives, doing it in a substantive way where you have additionality built into the model. You have permanence built into the model, because everybody is financially incentivized to make sure that carbon stays, that is coming down, that stays where it is. And it actually makes a heck of a lot more sense than some of the future model-based, maybe something will happen in the future kind of, carbon credits that exist in the market today that, quite frankly, are falling out of favor and are, part of the collapse of a big part of the
Right.
carbon credit world.
So we've dived into the dynamics behind the industry that you're operating in. I think we definitely set the scene that there's definitely greater need for actual maintenance and stabilization and interaction on the ground. It also is a differentiator for you as being able to build a reliable product going forward. And I think the building of the protocol around it, frankly, in and of itself, hopefully gives somewhat of a verification standard that people can abide by in the future, not just you as a lone pioneer in that approach.
Exactly.
It's taking a step back, especially looking at ReSeed in general. In doing my research, I came across two features that I'd love to hear you kind of briefly explain. So, what is the trading desk and what is the ReSeed marketplace? And you've mentioned probably aspects of it, but specifically within those product features, what are they?
Well, so what's interesting is we've come to recognize, I think, that first of all, the credits that we're creating right now in the marketplace are in the voluntary marketplace. And what that means is it's an unregulated global market for companies and countries and individuals who make voluntary, that want to participate in reducing their overall emissions profile, hopefully through reducing their burning of fossil fuels. And then the area basically, to zero that's left, to net zero, you need to buy carbon credits for, because that's really the only way to make up that difference. And that is it is the path forward to net zero. That's how we do it, right? We reduce the amount of emissions and help to ensure that others are securing more carbon in the ground than we are emitting ourselves. And so that process needs to happen through transactions. And so in voluntary markets, it's very, very complex. Just buying a carbon credit is way more difficult than you might expect. And so we set up our own system where companies can directly just come to us and say, we need 10,000 tons of carbon credits. We want them to be of this specific, from this geography or from this specific set of farmers. Maybe it's women-owned farmers. Maybe it's only those in sub-Saharan Africa, whatever it might be. And we then are able to deliver back to them through our verified through the online registry, those carbon credits, and then all of the data, the auditable data that goes along with it for them to be able to track.
And
that
is that
unique.
The trading desk? Or is it
well,
the
so
marketplace?
we've sort of moved it away from, we've decided not to operate our own trading desk. So what I was about to get to is that in the voluntary markets, and then especially in the regulated markets, there are brokers that are out there that are operating large volume, think of, like a stock exchange, but literally for carbon. And there are many of them that are out in the world. And what we've done is to build the ability for those brokers and those exchanges to call into our online system that we've developed, the registry and all the rest, through an API, and to basically support trading desks and other marketplaces and anywhere that carbon credits could be sold. We are supporting basically the integrity of our carbon credits all the way through, once again, digital from quite literally the soil, the ground, up to the delivery to customers. And this is a way to ensure that continues to happen, so that when transactions are taking place, people know whether the status of a carbon credit, is it retired or not? Is it, where did it come from? What's the provenance, and all the other data that's associated with it, regardless of where it's sold. Anyone who buys a ReSeed carbon credit has access to all of that data throughout the whole thing. So it's more about tying into the global network of trading desks and marketplaces, rather than trying to be the only trading desk or marketplace. And that's something that we realized that is necessary for us, and is a big part of this next evolution that we're going through, which is, how do we make sure that our credits look exactly the way that all of these trading desks and marketplaces, and especially as we're now starting to look at being recognized by regulated markets, how do we make sure that we're presenting all of that data in the same way that has consistency and trust and verification basically built throughout the entire process, and also adapts to the needs of those specific marketplaces. And I can tell you, one of the things that we are able to do is to segment out our carbon credits. I mentioned it earlier. Like if you wanted carbon credits from women-owned farms, we have the ability to do that. If you want carbon credits that are in areas of regions of the world that have more or less water in the soil, or have a lower educational attainment rate, or you can basically cross-reference those credits in many different ways, and you're still getting the same quality of credit every single time. It's just you're able to filter through, and the marketplaces and trading desks are really liking that about what we're able to offer, because it's so unique. There really is nothing like it on the marketplace, global marketplace right now, and it's something we want to see, as you said, others do and follow. We would love to see others, abide by the protocols that we've come up with for the definitions of all those things, and that would then allow them to offer a much higher quality and a much more in-demand product.
And so you mentioned, I think I counted 3 or 4 different reasons why these corporates or these brokers would come to you. But if you had to pick the main one, the one that you see is making the biggest difference, what would it be?
We are the highest integrity carbon credits offered on the planet today. And that's a very strong claim. It's one that we love to be challenged. We love due diligence when our customers do due diligence with us. We think everybody should be doing that level of due diligence when purchasing ecosystem services, period, and carbon credits, especially when they're interacting with people, because making sure that the people who are helping to produce those carbon credits are fairly and equitably compensated, that there is an integrity to the whole system, and that there's verification of all the claims, not just some very narrow band of scientific claims that are happening, is essential.
And honestly, from the way that you've explained everything, it's more so about a structural shift that you've done in terms of the way that you're even sourcing the carbon credits. I believe it. I mean, I think these are problems that, if you also think about the nature of carbon credits, operations in other industries, I think there's also a less tangible way to really know about how long lasting this. Some industries are really based on how long can you model a certain, direct your carbon capture. How long does that carbon half-life exist, right? And no one knows. I mean, people are trying to figure that out, but no one knows. So the way you go about it is like nature's way of doing it.
Well, absolutely. And one of the fundamental problems with the sort of legacy carbon market, which to me, it needs to become more legacy, is it's built on this concept, right, of decent science. There's a lot of really good components of science that are in a bunch of these different schemes that are out there. The problem is when you have the sort of Wall Street cowboys come in, and then you mix that with the Silicon Valley tech bros, and you mixed that, those groups together with deep science, really bad things actually start to happen. You just can't expect to stand up to deep scrutiny. And that's what's really, I think, happened. And so you were talking about, like, how do you know that when, you through direct air capture, in Iceland, there's a plant up there, it's a big antenna in the sky, literally a big vacuum in the sky kind of thing, right? Just sucking down carbon dioxide and trying to mimic photosynthesis, and then injecting that carbon dioxide directly into cavernous fissures in the ground, deep caverns, and then making the claim, well, because it's deep enough, it'll never, come out of the earth. And it's like, well, actually, you're not really understanding how geology works if you're saying that. The earth is very porous and things bubble up all the time. That's, that's a well-documented fact. And the fact is that making the claim that it's 100% and that for sure, and it's a 1,000-year solution and all the rest, is totally erroneous. And in fact, if you just looked at the reality of it and spoke to the true science behind what's happening, that, yep, we're pushing it down. We're delaying its release for, however many years. Eventually it will percolate up. But by that point, hopefully the overall carbon load in the atmosphere is enough that we can actually, the natural carbon cycles of the earth will be able to kick in. That might be okay. Maybe. I mean, that's up for debate.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you for sure And we know for sure because there's millions of years of documented, documentation of this technology, photosynthesis, and the cycles that and the natural carbon cycle that you are basically helping to enhance the storage of is much, much more effective. It's much more natural, and it is a way to do it that ensures future generations will continue doing. Right?
Yeah.
That's the point. And if you can do that and build an economy around it, then you are building a sustainable future. Not in the overused term of sustainable, but
Right.
really sustainable, and that where there will be a legacy going forward of incredible amounts of photosynthesis taking place, healthier
Right.
soils, better foods, healthier things, feeding more of the planet, turning around poverty. I think that's just a better option, and it's something that we need to be pursuing.
We won't really be able to get into it, but I think there's a really interesting maturation of some of the earliest industries in clean tech or climate tech 2.0. Net zero concrete is one. Carbon markets was definitely, one of the first, if not the first, in this wave. And you see the maturation of a lot of technologies that you start to see some really, really flashy new players. But for
Yep.
example, we had Forterra on, and so they work on net zero cement. They're
Mhm.
a Series B company. They made it pretty far. And the reason they made it pretty far is because what they do works and there's not that much
Yeah.
speculation around it. And I think I
Right.
see a lot of parallels here too. You have a lot of maturation, which is great, but I think you end up having a lot of noise out of people who just kind of think that they've come upon something and are trying to pioneer it. And what you're saying
Yes.
reminds me a lot of, do what works, do what makes sense, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel where it already
Exactly.
exists, right?
The simplest solution is almost always the best, right? And I'm not saying what we're presenting is not simple. Let's be clear, but it is so much more simple than these weird stand on your head hoping that something you forecast 500 years from now might happen. It's like, no, fundamentally, our work is pay farmers to do a thing that causes healthier land and soil and vegetation. We know that that leads to more carbon being stored, and measure it as it's happening as opposed to like what might happen in the future. Right? It just sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, if it makes sense, then of course, do the vetting, do the checking, and we encourage it. I think it's an important process for companies and individuals to go through, but do something is really what it comes down to. And direct air capture is so incredibly inefficient these days compared to photosynthesis that
Yeah.
you'd need, I think the last statistic I saw was like 300,000 of these multi-billion-dollar plants to be built around the world, for the optimization they hope to achieve in 10 years, right? I mean, we don't have time for that. Let's just focus on, there are 600 million farms that have gigatons and gigatons and gigatons of capacity, and we could be activating it. And at the same time, we better stop burning fossil fuels and all the other things that have to happen. I mean, let's just be clear. This is not the only solution. It's part of the overall climate solution. But from a carbon measurement perspective, it really is the best.
I know we're coming up towards the end of the show, so I wanted to rapid fire some of the interesting things that I came across in your profile, but I really appreciated you walking through all of this. It, I think, gives a systemic point of view that we didn't even really get to talk about this. I think we might be due for a part 2, but you are also, on a policy side, on the global stage with the World Economic Forum, you're the co-chair of the working group of carbon credits. So you clearly see the purview of a lot of what's going on in the space. But a lot of what your momentum is currently at right now was probably announced in tandem at COP28. You announced your partnership with the Nigerian-based nonprofit, the Center for Renewable Energy and Action on Climate Change. I read about it. We'll definitely link it in our episode so the audience can check it out. But honestly, my question is more on what was it like announcing that at COP? Especially, I think this was kind of the COP that everyone was super jazzed by and saw a lot of momentum at. What was like doing that there?
It was really interesting because I was pretty deeply involved in different aspects of COP and was invited into some of the negotiations and was conferring with different delegations and, trying to be a voice of an advocate for farmers as solution, right? Just fundamentally, farming can be part of the solution here. And when we do it, good things happen. So being able to announce this, it was a really big, it was a big deal. It was personally very gratifying for the company, for our company, and for CREAC, that our partners there. We had met a year prior at COP27 in Egypt. And it took us that year of building trust and building relationship and really getting this up off the ground, and to be at a point where the environment minister for Nigeria and a direct aide to an assistant to the president of Nigeria and all of these different people, and then probably for me most meaningfully, like a whole bunch of farmers and farmer groups that were there at that announcement. It had such a there was a sense of joy in it that was just so exciting to be a part of it, that there's something hopeful that people could actually do. And we could actually start to see the fact that places like Africa, where there's, Nigeria, I believe, outside of India, has the largest number of farmers in the world. It's up over 35 million, I believe, family farmers. They're part of the solution. And in fact, weighted the proper way, they could be the engine, right? A non-combustion engine, a photosynthesis engine, for really powering forward on how to deal with the carbon problem. We have all this legacy carbon in the atmosphere, all this carbon in the ground that could become emissions. We've got to make sure to stabilize the carbon in the ground and work on getting the legacy emissions out of the atmosphere. And family farmers in northwestern and northern Nigeria are literally at the forefront of some of the most advanced emerging technology and market systems to be able to help make that happen. That's a really exciting story, and it was palpable in the audience, and to be at COP, where, let's face it, there's a lot of non-productive things going on,
Right.
and a lot of greenwashing and all kinds of other things, but we were there as a substantive solution, and putting on display openly for the world to see how partnering with local farming communities can be, not just part of the solution, but a major part of the solution going forward.
Wow, that is powerful. I mean, yeah, I'm on your side there. I think when you go to these regions and you see what's happening on the ground, and you see not only how much there's going on, but frankly how much potential there is, and
Yes.
we're over here trying to build billion-dollar plants that have like a 25% chance of working versus
Yep.
you could invest a fraction of that money and probably get 10x the impact.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a handful of farmers, just to be clear, at 2 hectares each, is able to secure more carbon in the ground than those multi-billion-dollar plants. Where should we spend our money? Come on, like this is it's such an obvious solution.
Yeah, no, and I frankly, like I don't know what's in the air right now, but I was just speaking with Allison Wolf at Vibrant Planet, and so they do a lot with applying sort of the quantification side of nature-based solutions. So applying, honestly, a lot of the technologies that you're probably interfacing with in terms of verification and monitoring, but doing that at a larger scale on the advisory front. And I just, hats off to you, hats off to her. I think you guys are setting the scene for hopefully the next sort of hot wave of climate technologies that actually might go towards nature-based solutions in ag, because I think that's where a lot of the better alpha is. It doesn't matter if it's not as flashy. I think it's more sure. So,
well, and one of the things, I don't want to be too promotional here, but one of the things I want to just state is
Please.
that listening to all this, credits and farmers over, in Africa and all these different places, it's all very abstract sometimes. And I think one of the things that everyone listening to this podcast right now, and hearing this, has the ability to take action either as an individual or as a company. You don't have to be one of the huge, Fortune 500 companies in the world to be taking climate action. And I highly encourage everybody. We have tools for individuals and for businesses on our site to engage and learn and figure out how they can become part of the solution here. And more directly as a pitch, how you can support smallholder farmers in this effort to fight climate change. It's a really substantive way to do it. So much better than a lot of the randomness, I think, that's out there. And as everything that we do, we document everything we do and show our work. And so hopefully folks listening can come and participate.
And that's what you did on this podcast. You showed everyone here how you do your work, and I think it's really going to make a difference. So I appreciate you wrapping that up. Honestly, you did it. I would have to have done it, and I think I would have paraphrased it a little bit worse than the way you did it. So I really appreciate that. Before we sign out, I actually want to call out, we talked about you have a huge interest in dogs ahead of the show. I actually don't think I heard any barking.
No, the dogs have been incredibly quiet. Yeah, they've been incredibly quiet.
They're enjoying the episode.
Anytime somebody does meetings with me, when I travel around the world, I also just in my spare time do a lot of dog rescue work and work with
Wow.
dog behavior and things like that. And so there's always a dog or two or five barking. If we had spoken last 2 weeks ago, I was in Puerto Rico on site at a rescue, and I was doing an interview, and literally there were 25 dogs just all around me, and it was just
Wow.
mayhem. But I like it that way. So
Do you have a favorite breed by chance?
mutts.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So basically,
So
I personally, yeah, the dogs that are, they're usually the healthiest, and
yeah.
also are the ones that you find at shelters and rescues.
Hmm.
And it's counter to what a lot of people think. But these days, with dog breeding the way it's a total mess. Not to get off on a whole other topic, but it is something that, yeah, give me a good mutt any day,
Yeah.
where it's
Yeah.
really hard to tell what kind of breed they are. And they're almost always the most loyal and the most friendly, and usually the healthiest too.
100%. Yeah, I had
Yeah.
a mutt growing up, and I feel like I had one of those mutts that they just called poodle because they had no idea what the
Yeah.
heck it was. So they were just like, "Oh, this is a
Totally.
poodle, right?" And
Yeah.
he was a healthiest, kindest, fan favorite dog. So I
Yes.
100% agree with that. Well, look,
Absolutely. And
Josh.
there's always a dog for there are always multiple dogs per person in the world, and so finding yours is a life goal.
Amazing. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a huge, huge pleasure. It's been so much fun. Before we sign off, where can the audience find you?
So come to our website, reseed.farm, and that's FARM, just in case that wasn't clear. And that's quite frankly all the socials, all the links, all the things are there. And if you want to reach out to us, we have a contact us form, and we'd be thrilled to engage.
Amazing. It's been real fun. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome back to the takeaway section. It'll be just me for this one, so let's dive right in. The first thing that really stood out to me was the mindset shift of how to think about nature-based solutions through these agricultural methods. It's pretty clear and intuitive that investing in ag restoration and maintenance, although it's less flashy than the newest carbon capture plant, is much more economically friendly in order to restore carbon credits and to actually have high-quality ones. The second is how he's building a prototype and a protocol around his methodology. I think, frankly, it's a byproduct of his position on the World Economic Forum and the global thought process around that. But frankly, it's kind of like creating the standard and then being the solution for it. I mean, I think you see this happening in renewable energy, but I think this is something that's going to work out really well for them and feels almost like a form of market shaping for me. And of course, like an altruistic way. And the last is his affirming about what works with smallholder farms. I can go on a whole rant about this because it was core to my work when I was working with smallholder farms in East Africa. But it's true that you really have to work through the natural community ties. In this way, I feel like his emphasis on community was particularly effective. And I also started thinking about, is this a way to verify the quality of carbon credits, especially when it comes to ag restoration and protection? Is there a way for us to understand how engaged the local community is and ways to verify that on marketplaces? I think he does that through building up his constant feedback and assurance and support network. And so is there a way to see that across other platforms, and can other founders do that to include into their platforms? Those are the three. Anyway, thanks so much for listening. Each week we have great guests on, and each week I'm in awe that I get to do this. I really appreciate this. I know Silas really appreciates this, and we couldn't do this without you all, so thank you. Anyway, till next time.
We are excited to announce that we have launched a Patreon. You can find this newly linked in our Substack and audio platform descriptions. We are both really just so grateful for each and every one of you, and wanted to create a way to interact with you and for you to support us on our journey as we continue and try to talk to the best people doing amazing things in climate tech. We do all of this on the time we can muster outside of our day jobs, so any support means the world. Now, gushing over, back to the show.